So yes, this evening we're going to talk about The Mighty Heart in action. Not just the book, but also about how it has actually enabled the second largest retailer to actually bring about some big and small changes within and outside. And we're going to learn a lot more about what's in store for us this year. But before I speak more and ask more, we have lots of time for questions as well. I'm going to pass on to our dear Scilla, who I've known for almost 10 years now. It started with me asking her some simple questions, asking to help me out. And through this time, I have learned from Scilla so much. But what I really admire is how Scilla walks the talk. And it never ceases to amaze me how she has this amazing ability to pick insights and write, and then not just write, inspire action. And we are here today to witness this very phenomenon that started in lockdown and has become a global movement. Scilla, over to you.
Thanks, Darshita. What a friend. Picture this. It's a 5-star hotel in a very luxury resort. It's 2014. I've been asked by the CEO of probably the largest and most famous cosmetics and fashion house in the world to talk with her 26 global vice presidents about things they might learn. It's the opening day of their annual gathering, and I'm first up. Gentlemen, I say, our subject today will be listening. Listening? Mais pourquoi? We talk all the time to our staff, and they listen to us, and we listen to them. We do not need any exercise in listening. No. I said, well, let's just check your listening skills. So I asked them to choose a partner and sit opposite the partner, and for the first 5 minutes to keep legs and arms uncrossed and to keep eye contact and to ask their partner a question, which was this: tell me, what is your highest potential? Shrugs, raised eyebrows, and I would like you to listen intently to what your partner says for the first 5 minutes, and then feed back to him, all hymns in this case, feed back to him what you've heard, but not only what you've heard, but what are the feelings behind what you've heard. And then you'll change over and do the same thing. Shrugs and more raised eyebrows, but bless them, they did it. At the end of 15 minutes, there was a different atmosphere in the room. Oh, maybe there's something here. So then I said to them, I'd like you now to address whatever conflicts and disagreements you may have in this company. And you're the men who hold the can for these conflicts and disagreements. What I'd like you to do is to pick an individual, one of your colleagues with whom you have a conflict or disagreement, sit opposite that person, arms and legs uncrossed, keeping eye contact, and ask your partner to speak in the first person about what this conflict means to him, without pointing finger and accusing, and you just listen. And you listen so intently that when he's finished speaking, you can read back to him what you heard him say and what the feelings were behind what he said. And then you change over. At the end of 2 sessions of this, there was a dawning going on in the room, which was then spoken about, which was the following. When we actually listened, we learned so much more about what's going on in this conflict that we began to understand it differently. And secondly, what we perceived in our partner was pain, disillusion, sadness sometimes. And when those feelings began to come into the room, everything began to shift. Anyway, long story short, they installed this practice of active listening, deep listening they called it, amongst all their teams. And it has now spread through the entire company. And one of those very global vice presidents said to me, after 3 months, what you taught us enabled us to resolve in 15 minutes what would have taken 4 hours and still not been resolved, or maybe 4 weeks. So we're now embedding that in our social charter for the whole company. And that's what they did. So, you might think that's a nice story to begin this evening with. Well, what it points to is the fact that now in this world that we're living in, many of our leaders have lost, and many of our companies have lost the power of the heart, have lost the comprehension and elasticity and the fundamental understanding that the heart can provide. And I want to just tell you how this book that we're celebrating tonight came about. It was before the pandemic struck. It was late in 2019. And I and my colleagues, who you're going to meet tonight, had the feeling that something was coming towards us. We didn't know what it was. That was going to require every skill we could amass so that people could deal with heartbreak, loneliness, mental illness, death. And then the pandemic struck. And I sat down and I gathered everything that we knew and wrote it down in a little tiny booklet that was published very fast called The Mighty Heart. That transformed very quickly into an open online course of 10 modules. And I'll tell you in a minute what the modules are. But the point that arose from that is that there was this enormous need, particularly at what we might call the grassroots, of people wanting the skills that would enable them to deal with what was coming towards us in what turned out to be the pandemic. So what they were looking for was, how do you develop the ability to cooperate? How do you put across connectivity? How do you communicate in a way that is actually going to have power in it? How do you face fear with courage? And as we know, in short, this is the power of the heart. And it occurs to me again and again that what's going on here is that your heart and my heart may break many times in a lifetime, but the heart just keeps on beating all the time. How mighty is that? So, so far this course that we developed has enabled one of the largest retail houses in the world, I think, to enable people in their teams to use unexpected responses to the kind of challenges that we're all facing. And at the level of working in a shop. What do you do when there's a complete misunderstanding in your staff? When it's likely to escalate into a crisis of misunderstanding? How do you intervene at that point to make sure it doesn't go over the top? When a young colleague wants to stand up for what she believes in, and as she does so, the floor caves in beneath her, she starts to blush and stammer and can't express what it is she wants to express. How do you enable that person to speak their truth? When a person turns up for work looking worried, rather than just saying, "How are you?" and letting them get away with, "I'm fine," how about asking, "How are you really today? How are you really now?" And then you discover the reality of that person. Maybe her grandmother died over the weekend. How's that going to influence how she works all through the week? So this online course that we've developed offers skills to support leaders at every level, in a bank, in a government, in a community, in your child's school, to find new ways to be brave enough to actually start using the skills that will contribute to these world global crises that we're facing. And we often call these skills soft skills, but as anybody who's used them knows, they are the hardest skills to learn and practice. That's why we need a course to do it that has 10 modules in it. Now let me just ask you some questions. Do any of you in this room have an inner critic? If you do, you're amongst 98% of the population. You have a face that sits, or a beast that sits on your shoulder and mutters at you, most likely at 2 o'clock in the morning, and tells you you're useless and why do we bother with you, and you're just not good enough. Do you know how to transform that voice in your head so that it becomes your ally and actually your guide in changing the world? That's one of the things we teach. When you're driven mad by a family member, instead of coming out with a stream of invective of why you're so fed up with them, can you listen deeply to that aggressive person and change the whole situation for both of you? Has it dawned on you that we make much better decisions with the heart than with the head? In short, do we know that inner work, self-awareness, multiplies the effectiveness of our work, whether it's in the community, at your desk, or in the world? In developing these 10 skills, which I'm going to run through for you now, we've drawn on the experience not just of our colleagues, many of whom are in this room, but we've drawn on the experience of people who work in collaboration with Peace Direct, the organisation I set up in 2003, who are in hot conflict areas all over the world, and many of them risking their lives so that other people don't get killed. So it's their skills that are embedded in this course, and their stories. We teach people how to deal pragmatically with loss, the loss and the overload and the stress that so many people are feeling today. Some people think that the heart belongs only in the home, or at the very most in religion, not knowing how effective the heart can be at work, achieving actual results I see somebody at the back who's been doing that in a very sophisticated company. The online course that we're talking about uses riveting life stories to show how actions taken by the heart have changed family life, transformed negotiations, and even saved lives. Some of you know my experience with Lieutenant Colonel Chris Hughes, who was leading his men on a patrol through Najaf in 2003, shortly after the 2003 invasion of Iraq by the United States, when you still could lead a foot patrol down a street. And all of a sudden, out of the houses and mosques on either side of the road came furiously angry men, screaming, yelling in Arabic, and these young American soldiers didn't speak any Arabic and were terrified. Chris Hughes strode straight into the middle of the whole throng with his rifle pointed at the ground and gave his men an order they had never heard in their lives. Kneel! They wobbled to the ground with their heavy backpacks, their helmets and their weapons pointed downwards and their heads lowered, and the whole crowd grew silent. And after 3 or 4 minutes, everybody went home. A massacre was avoided. Either way, could have been a lynching, could have been shooting. And it was avoided by presence, the sheer presence of that young lieutenant colonel. He knew instinctively what to do because he knows the secret, and that is that most violence is caused originally by humiliation. And the fastest antidote to humiliation is respect. And that's what happened. So, the skills we offer in this course have been tested in war zones. They've saved lives, but they've made an awful lot of people very much happier. Our teachers in the online course come from many of these war zones. They're people who have taught youngsters in northwest Pakistan how to go into the madrasas and identify young people who are being trained for jihad, go home with them to their families, talk with the families about why the Quran would not approve jihad. They've prevented 250 young men from carrying out the suicide bombings. I mean, these are great teachers, and we bring them online to you in this course. We enable people to learn how to take a stand on an issue that you care about. That young woman I described earlier, how do you ground yourself? How do you hold yourself? How do you get your voice instead of, when we're very nervous, the voice goes up here and we talk very fast and nobody really can listen to us because it's all going too quickly. You have to get your voice down in your belly to have the authority to put across something that might not be very popular. So we're demonstrating what are called soft skills, but actually they're some of the strongest, toughest skills in the world. And lastly, what's, I suppose, almost more important to me than anything else in this book is the very last part, because personally I'm passionate about enabling young people worldwide to imagine and become an active part of the future that we all want for our kids. In other words, what can people, ordinary people, all over the world do in practical terms, whether that means removing your savings from arms development companies, whether it means taking a stand with your children's teachers, whatever it is that you need to know to make a safer future for everybody is embedded in these hard skills. So it's called The Mighty Heart in Action. And I'm really looking forward to the questions you're going to have. I can see them already. But before that, we've got a treat. Our protagonist on my left is a woman who has taken the corporate world by storm. She instantly understood the value that these skills could bring to one of the largest retail companies on the planet. And she so understood it and embraced it that she has seen to it that her company has adopted it. This is Angela Gallants, the head of the HR department of the H&M Group Western Europe. And I'm so thrilled to have her with us this evening.
A warm welcome also from my side, and I want to take the next 10 minutes to share a little bit of our experience we made with this course. And I can only say what you have said now during the last minutes. For us, it was really a gift. And it was, of course, first it was my intuition, because we were struggling into the pandemic. So we were a retailer, and we, from one minute to another, we closed nearly half of our stores worldwide. And
Which is how many?
Yes, nearly 2,000 stores we closed. And of course, this was so tough from the financial perspective, but also this was even tougher for our colleagues. And all what was happening already, maybe under the surface, was now coming out. You know, all what you have described, you know, young colleagues moving around, having a good life, were locked down in a small apartment and were really lonely. No relationships over the next months. They were in fear, or they lost their grandparents, but they couldn't see them anymore. They were, you know, they were also really, really shocked and frightened for their jobs. And of course, we have relationships all over the world. We were discussing how to go on with production. And this was really like, how can suppliers survive and their colleagues for example, in Bangladesh can survive. So there were, from one moment to another, really, really, I think like we all have felt this, the world was turning around. And of course, we started then to set up meetings and to engage with our colleagues. And then we had a meeting, an external meeting, and for me it was really clear this is the way for our colleagues to help them, and for us all really to look into our hearts. And then we started this course with the first group, and I'm so happy that you're also here, Fritz, because Fritz helped us also so much through this course. And it was so, you know, it was so refreshing also for us. We started with the question, what breaks my heart? And of course we were in the pandemic. So, you know, the colleagues, they really could feel it. What is breaking my heart? But we had also colleagues, they said, I don't know. And then we asked, can you listen to your heart? Can you hear your heart? And we have had colleagues, they said, I never asked this question. So I make it now a little bit fluffy, but I'm a controller. I'm working with my mind. And the benefit of this course first for us was, you know, it is so structured, it is so guided, it helps you so much to open up immediately. And it creates so great teamwork, first of all, because it gives you an atmosphere where everyone is equal. So you're like a beginner, And when you're honest, you are a beginner. And then you're jumping into the course and everyone feels, okay, there is something to explore and something to develop. And then the course is coming every week, and it's really like, we had sessions before we said, are you also exciting? It's Thursday. But really in a really good dynamic spirit. And then it's really your development. So what breaks your heart? Are you a good listener? We have quite soon found out we are only a talkative organization. We love to talk. And I think there are so many organizations who, when they are honest, who can say, yes, we too. So it was rewarded to talk. The more we talk, the better it is. And then we found out this exercise really to say nothing, to sit there and say nothing. We all said, this is really hurting. We can't sit there and only explore who you are without talking. So it gave us a lot of energy, and it was also a lot of fun, to be honest, because the excitement, the exploring, going deeper, and then, like you said, so incredible, outstanding consultant or teachers. And during the development, you could really see that we were developing into a more open, really more open level, not only to be colleagues, to work on tasks, but really to treat us and open up as human beings. And we had this one course in the middle, to take a stand, and we had a colleague, and maybe, and also I think you, Fritz, but for me it was so touching, because she was then telling us that she is so frightened for her country. And she's coming from Poland, and she said, I'm really frightened that we as young women have not the rights anymore. And then you see, we are not only colleagues, we are not only working with tasks, and at the end, the success of a company is driven by people. So people are business, and the more people can open up, can take a stand, and can be in service, and can also, yes, be who they are, and lead it by heart, the more successful a company will be. Because we are working all together. And for us, it was so opening, so also that we know each other better by heart, not only by task. Okay, you are doing this well and you are doing this well, but I think you know the picture of the iceberg. It's all about emotion, relationship, how we work together, how we can open up and then really be brave, encouraged, and take a stand and do also what we are, yes, able to do. And then we figured out, okay, this course is the base for us to get into action. And what does this mean for us to bring the mighty heart into action, that it's not only a course? And we really developed, and we did it already in between, and it's now such a great gift for us to say, okay, where do we stand? It's not to look to others. We're looking into our company and what can we do in our stores? And how can we develop the mighty heart for everyone? And to take a stand, to be in good relation with the community and start from there. So we reached out to our stores, and now we developed already over 100 corporations where we are cooperating with organizations in the neighborhood. So not to go too far, because it's so important that we create good communities and be a relevant neighbor. And we have, for example, in our region, we have over 1,000 stores. So imagine we can cooperate with over 1,000 organizations to work together and to do good. And this is I think, all about to go through the course again. What breaks my heart when I listen to myself, when I listen to my community, to the organization, where can I really, and to put away my emotions or to transform it, like you say, into go away from, oh, I'm not big enough or I'm not couraged enough, I have fears. Step out and take a stand and make it happen. And we have so great examples where we never could imagine. In teamwork, first in teamwork to open up and also to, like you say, this question, everything fine? Yeah. And how do you deal when someone is saying no? No. And we have now really more often the situation, I have 2 weeks ago a colleague, he said, I'm ready for therapy. With a smile, but this never happened before because he's really structured. And I said, okay, let's talk about. He said, yeah, let's go in, this openness through quite from the heart to be open and transparent and honest. I think this is so important also for success for a company. And so I can only recommend, and it's also fun to do this course. I think this is also important because you can find so much out of yourself, but also together with your colleagues, and this brings so much energy. We had so much fun also all together. It's not development by heart is not only heavy we imagined. So this was really great. And once again, thank you so much, Scilla. It was for us a gift to develop further. And when we are now looking back, we as the most core benefit, it's that we are much more honest, and that drives business much faster ahead.
Thank you, Gailey. Thank you for your intuition, for acting on it, but also being a role model for so many HR managers out there who do not have the courage all the time to make decisions like the one you've made for the organization. Thank you. Before we move into Q&A, we have a surprise guest for you for 5 minutes. Where is Jeremy?
Okay. Well, thank you, Scilla, for asking me to say a few words. My name is Jeremy Gilly. I'm the founder of Peace One Day. And as I listen to this, incredible story, and have the privilege of knowing this unbelievable woman who's just a complete inspiration to so many, who's just amazing, So listen, my 20 years is just being on the road. The reason why this makes so much sense to me is a long time ago I was ever so frightened and confused, and I went on a journey with my film camera to see if I could manifest a day of peace, a day of ceasefire and non-violence, and see if I could get that day voted by every government of the world. And after travelling the world and being with the Dalai Lama and Kofi Annan and Mary Robinson and Nelson Mandela and Shimon Peres and Amro Musa and many, many others, that day was created, and the 21st of September is the World's Day of Peace, and a lot of people now are gathering in the name of peace on that day. But what's interesting about this is that when we created the day, I could hear the cynics saying, it's just a day, it's symbolism, it's not going to make any difference, it's just a day. And it really worried me because the people who really knew about conflict were saying a day like this can relieve humanitarian activity, it can unite families and children and workplaces and all sorts of things, and that's beneficial. So we tried to prove that in Afghanistan. So after 2.5 years of work, we went to Afghanistan, and with lots of support, we managed to get the Taliban and NATO and ISAF and UNAMA and all the agencies to say, okay, we will agree to a ceasefire on the 21st of September in Afghanistan, and the Taliban agreed to that. And because the Taliban agreed to not killing or kidnapping anybody on that day, it meant that UNICEF and WHO could mobilize 10,000 vaccinators, go into areas that you couldn't normally go, and they vaccinated 1.5 1.4 million children against polio on that day. So we had proved that it worked, but what then leads to me understanding this is that the United Nations Department for Security and Safety put out a press statement saying that there was a 70% reduction of violent incidences on the day. A 70% reduction as a consequence of everyone coming together. And that then led me to really understanding, well, where is that the fact that you can measure violence was really interesting. And the more I looked into it, I realised that 95% of the violence that's going to happen today is going to happen in the home, the community, school, and place of work. 95% of the violence, the front line, is in the home, the community, the school, and place of work. So when I listen to Scilla and the incredible work that she's doing, what really is going to shift the level of consciousness around the fundamental issues that humanity faces is the mighty heart. Thank you for asking me to say a few words. This is incredible, and you're amazing. Thank you.
We now have the floor open for questions, thoughts, comments.
Hi Scilla, the course sounds amazing and obviously hits on some fairly deep-rooted things that need to change in society. My question is more around you as an individual or the organisation as an individual. You guys are going to be making a profit from this. Is that profit going back into other wider things to help make the Mighty Heart bigger, broader, and fix some of the bigger consequences out there?
Thank you, great question. Q. Isla Glaser, our CEO, and she will be able to situate the Mighty Heart within the business plan for peace, where it all started.
Thank you, Scilla. So I'll share some words now, and then we can also have some more Q&A afterwards. But what a special occasion to come together in person, hearing about the journey Gailey's had when we're all behind Zoom rooms, all looking at our cue boxes, and here we are together. It's really an honour. And as Scilla shares at the beginning, Scilla really had this premonition, this premonition that something was coming that's going to tax every part of us. And wow, hasn't the pandemic done that? And I was really just so honoured to join Business Plan for Peace last year. And I was living in Myanmar for many years. And I arrived back 1 week before the coup happened in Myanmar. And actually, coincidentally, started this position with Scilla on that day. And the coup really, it just took the floor away from the whole population in the country. Because we've been feeling the pandemic around the world. We've been feeling it here. We've been feeling the tensions. We've been feeling, all this negativity under the surface. And in Myanmar, when the floor was taken, it floored people. And the country now is moving towards civil war. And as we know, as Jeremy was also sharing, we've also seen the impact in Afghanistan. We've also seen the tensions rising in Ukraine right now. And around the world, all these tensions are continuing, which is why, as Jeremy's saying, we need this day of peace so much, because it really does bring and reduce down conflict. And so, as we journey through this pandemic, we've all become so incredibly connected, and we've got the opportunity to come together now in new ways. And as we journey through this pandemic, the journey continues. We really have a gift. And Scilla has really, Gailey shared it as well, we really have a gift. For everyone that's been on the course, it's a gift. Everyone that's going to read the book, it's a gift. And for us at Business Plan for Peace, it's been really an incredible gift. At Business Plan for Peace, founded by Scilla a couple of years ago, and we've survived the pandemic, at Business Plan for Peace, we believe that a world without destructive conflict is possible. And the mighty heart is the heart of all of this. We really believe that if people understand conflict transformation skills, if they're able to move away from the conflict styles of one on top, power over, as is happening in Myanmar right now as we speak, or competition, I know Gailey shared this before, competition, cutthroat competition, where people aren't seen, aren't heard. If we can really move to a world of collaboration, where we can transform collaboration so that people are seen, people are heard, imagine what a world that could be. And so at Business Plan for Peace, we really have two goals. Our first goal is to ensure that conflict transformation skills are understood, firstly, never learned them in the education system, secondly, applied, and thirdly, invested in. Invested, of course, financially for new innovative ways to support collaborative ways of working to transform destructive conflict around the world. But secondly, to really make sure that in the hearts, the minds, and everything that Jeremy's been doing culturally, as Gelly is doing through the team, and as Scilla is just such a beacon of light. So how can we do that to invest in that? This is really the heart of what we do at Business Plan for Peace. So I invite you just to take a moment and just to really arrive here in this space. What an incredible moment to come together. And I invite you, might like to just, close your eyes or even place your hands on your heart, feel your heart beating. And just really be present here in this space. And just imagine for a moment. Just imagine a world where conflict transformation is the norm. Take a pause. Connect to your heart and imagine that. Imagine a world where leaders all over the world, government leaders, companies, listen deeply and really respond to the needs of the people around them. Imagine a world in every single country where the military de-escalates violence as well as protecting everyone around the world. Imagine people coming together from across diverse sectors, collaborating, shifting systems, and shifting the system so that it works for everyone on this planet. Imagine a world where everyone is seen and heard, and where everyone can have that space to connect with what breaks their heart and has the time to marry their skills to be in service to the world. Just take a moment and really feel that vision for our future world. Hold that vision. And when you're ready, very gently, if your eyes are closed, reopen. Hold it carefully in your heart. Because this is where peace building starts. Peace building starts from that vision, the vision Scilla has, the vision we are collectively looking at together. And then it's about really building that road, step by step, person by person, leader by leader. And you may be thinking, but it's impossible. It's not possible. I think already tonight Jeremy's shown that what looks impossible is possible. And if you ask people in Myanmar right now, faced with the worst brutality, just a flood, a wall of the most dominant force and power, they still think it's possible. They are working every single day, step by step, person by person, to realize their vision. And so absolutely together, we can build that. And so we invite you all to really think right now also about what breaks your heart. Scilla has created this incredible course. What breaks your heart? What are the skills you can connect to your heart? And how can you be in service? How can you take the steps to build that vision you've just had here right now? And as Business Plan for Peace, this is what we're going to be doing together to create a groundswell of people who believe that a world without destructive conflict is both possible and necessary, and who are doing this inner work, all the inner work that Scilla has created, to effect out to action. So we invite you later, when you connect together, share what breaks your heart with each other, share what the opportunities are, what steps you're going to take, and here's where change starts. So this is where we are at Business Plan for Peace, 2 years old, an exciting future ahead, and we're Business Plan for Peace together. So thank you, everyone. And if there's any questions,
your question. I am on the board with Scilla and Isla for Plan for Peace, and while it has been an incredible gift by Scilla to actually give the training to the non-profit, so all the funds go to the non-profit, and what we're also doing is offering this program and this course as an open course for individuals to join. A lot of people who cannot afford to join this program have a sponsorship from the organization to receive free training and or reduced training. So the idea of the program and the proceeds that the program receives is to actually reinvest back and give the opportunity of this training to more and more individuals, and especially those who cannot afford to have these trainings. And most of us know Scilla, but for those of you who don't know Scilla, I have never known Scilla to actually just take things for herself. And I think that's what gives power to a movement like this, because once you get into the swell of giving, we just join more who want to join this movement of giving. So thank you. Yes. Thank you. I'll just repeat your question. Are there organizations or key individuals we want to target to take this further? Yes, and I'll let Scilla answer more.
Thank you for the question. We are extending the possibilities of using this course to a number of institutions where future leaders are being shaped. So we would love to get this into military training academies, and there are 2 people here who are already working on that. We want it to go into business schools, because when you get a business school training, it's pretty hardcore. And the heart is not always very prevalent there. We reckon if people in their 30s, as they're becoming leaders, can get this into their core thinking, core feeling. That's going to change decisions in the future. So business schools, universities, diplomatic schools, so that our diplomats learn to use a different type of skill than they're using at the moment. So those are some of the ways. The other people that we would love to involve now are people who are working in very sophisticated financial institutions. People who have both the knowledge of and the power over where investments are made, because that's key to the future for all of us. If a similar swing was to happen, as happened from fossil fuels to renewables in terms of investment, if we swung out of investing in weapons production companies and invested instead in some of the initiatives that are happening all over the world. Peace Directors identified 2,800 locally led initiatives which need funding. That would be one of the changes we'd like to see. I could go on too long. Let's see if there are any other questions, and thank you for yours.
Thank you, Scilla. We have another question. Question to summarize is, with all the brutality happening in Myanmar, how do you take a program like this to influence a situation like we have in Myanmar?
Thank you, and what a question. $1 million question for sure. I think there's a couple of things, and I know Jeremy touched on this earlier, and it's really embedded in the whole course. But one of the first steps in trying to transform conflict is dealing with the person, ourselves. And we know as well that the person influences relationships, influences structure and culture. And so we see in Myanmar that there's been such a dominant culture now of one over, power on top, my way is the only way, a militarized culture in Myanmar. And so it's a really key question is, how do we try and transform that? And it is through the people. You know, if we could sit down with a commander-in-chief right now and really listen and have a moment to connect, and that takes time, it's trust, step by step, person by person to get there. Because that's really key, it's the listening skills. And so how do we transform the culture? And what we've been seeing in Myanmar is that that's been happening in country opened. And the youth especially, you know, their culture's shifting. And that's why for the youth, and as Scilla was saying, you know, the youth really are so important, because they're not accepting it, they're changing, and they're going to be the future leaders. So that's really the core, you know, how can we work in the spaces where we can work to get towards those spaces where, of course, there's enormous challenges and immense challenges.
And thank you for the mighty heart, because that's what we really need. And I think that there's something going on in the world. It's almost like there's a breaking point where people go either right or left. I have since August 15th been involved in helping people out of Afghanistan. And it's been a very, I've never been to Afghanistan, and I've become very deeply involved in it. And somehow I can see what you're doing, Scilla, is what I feel is needed there now. And I can tell you a very funny story. I've been helping evacuating a lot of different people, among them military and women at high risk, journalists, judges, etc., etc. And we text, going back and forth. And I was in communication with the general, and I sent him, by accident, a green heart. And it was sort of like the reaction was just crazy. He started laughing, and it's like, thank you so much for doing that. Yeah. So to go back to that question that was before, like, how do you start? How do you use the heart? You just use it, and you don't discriminate who you send it to. And I think that is what you do, Scilla. You just walk into everybody's hearts, and we can do that. Yeah, even generals, and they love it actually. So it wasn't really a question. It was just like I don't know, leaning into hearts, because I think that's what we need today.
Your heart got bigger doing this, bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that is what happens, because when you give, you get.
Exactly.
You know. I was also thinking about another thing. Sorry, I'm going to let the microphone go. It's what breaks the heart, right? And it's you see it as something that breaks into pieces, but it's also cracking open. It's like a seed, you know. We have all been so busy growing upwards, whereas a seed, when it cracks open, it takes root. And I think that is the start of the Mighty Heart in action.
Thank you, Caroline.
In the book you talk about right brain intelligence. I'd love to just hear a little more about what that is and how that applies to the Mighty Heart in action.
Thank you. Well, it's central to
The way that the future could be. I'll put it very simplistically. Largely now, decisions are made in a linear left brain, get the results, use the money, and take a direct line to what you need to get. That's the left brain. What the right brain is good at is seeing the whole picture. It's good at seeing the suffering, what's actually humanly going on at the ground level. And so what's happening at the moment is there's a complete imbalance between the left brain, which is dominant at the moment, and the right brain, which is considered a bit soft stuff, really, not terribly useful. So what's really important is for those of us who have very strong left brains to develop the right brain, and those of us who have really strong right brains to speak up and to be heard and to be active, because it's quite hard when you've got a very heart-opened right brain to actually see what's the action that you need to take. So we're talking about rebalancing if you like, the masculine intelligence and the feminine intelligence, but I don't want to generalize it really. It's about the capacities that any human being has. And so the point, if you like, from our point of view, for the future, is to enable more and more people, particularly in the corporate world, to develop and use and value right brain thinking. And we can expand on that if you like, but there's quite a big section on it at the back of the book, at the third part of the book. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Question?
Scilla and team, thank you very much indeed. I've got a quite interesting question and a rather boring question. My interesting question is, I was struck by, you mentioned respect, and you mentioned a dignity would be another word one would think. This seems very important, so I'd like you to tell us a bit more about how you incorporate that into your course. My boring question is about organisation. I imagine, because it's a business plan for peace, you're doing this with individuals, but organisations. Now, presumably, the people who've done the course won't do it again. So are you training trainers? When people come into the organisation, do they do the course? Does it become part of practice of the ethics and ethos of the organisation?
Thank you.
Oliver, thank you for the question. I'll deal with the boring stuff
first. It's not the least bit boring, it's central to what we're wrestling with. Last year we ran a course for new facilitators. And frankly, if I'm honest, it wasn't very successful. It didn't produce the facilitators we wanted. And we now need, because we're getting more and more requests for courses. So we've learned our lessons, and we're going to run a double sequence this spring and summer. There will first be an open course that anybody can join. It'll be online, it'll be reasonably priced, and there will be scholarships. Only if you have done the open course or done it before can you join the facilitators course. And you'll also have to jump through some hoops to show that you are a competent would-be facilitator. Because we're going to need a team of at least a dozen really crack facilitators to run this. And Fritz, who's here with us, is busy working with H&M from the very beginning when he and I began running the open course. And Fritz has turned himself into a master facilitator. So that's what was the other question? Oh, respect. Oh, close to my heart, Oliver. The more I examine personal quarrels and major international quarrels, what's often at the root of those quarrels is that some country, some leader, some individual has felt humiliated. They felt reduced, they felt invaded, they felt minimized, and that is very hard on the psyche. And it produces, unless a lot of inner work is done, it produces the wish for revenge. And revenge cooks in a nasty mess. And so revenge comes out as inflicting the same pain that you've been in on somebody else. And what we found, and I'm sure what many people in this room have found, is that if you can find it within yourself, if you're in a conflict with someone who may feel humiliated by you, if you can find it in yourself to show that person respect, everything shifts. Doors open, plans are made. And I see a lot of people nodding who've had this experience. So it seems obvious once you get it and once you look at what's going on around us right now. But it's a formula that works. Find the capacity and the bigness of heart to show respect to someone who feels humiliated by you.
And thank you, Scilla. And I think also in organizations, it's so important when you look at diverse teams. When we look, for example, in our stores, our sales advisors, they have often the feeling that they are not so respected than the managers, for example, and also that they are not so important. But at the end, they are the most important colleagues in our organization because they are meeting the customer. So, and I think we can't talk it in to tell our leaders, please respect your colleagues or your sales advisor. It must come by heart. And I think it's so important and also then the whole system behind. Is the system supporting the respect? Or are they only executing? We have discussed a long period that we have to go from execution to contribution. So what can they actively contribute? Because when they always only execute, and it's not only in the store, it's all around, I think, the organization. There are the leaders who are designing and contributing, and then there is a huge amount of colleagues, they're only executing. And of course, they will never be as engaged if they really can find meaning and contribution. But can we really deliver this? And can we really act on it and not only to talk about it? And we had huge discussions. We had also to really be honest to us. What is their contribution? To be proud of also, not only to sell garments. So I really think respect is all around it. It's all, once again, a huge part of the last module. Can you really be in service? And it does not matter if you're a top manager. Do you really like to be in service for people? And yeah, we had some tough times, to be honest, about these questions, to be honest. Because we also discussed, yeah, but we like it that we are telling what to do and the others are executing. Yeah. And it's all around in a lot of organizations, that at the end it's exactly like this. And to turn this around is also a huge effort. So I also like this, to be honest, can I be in service? It's all about, yeah.
My question, or my thought, I think you've actually partly addressed in the last couple of comments you've made, but you may wish to add. It's around being prepared or thinking through what we need to be ready to do or support once we help someone to open their mighty heart. I've been sitting with someone in my mind who I was in front of a couple of months ago, who I'm working in a conflict, a very active, destructive conflict environment at the moment, and I was sitting in front of someone a couple of months ago who I had no doubt would not hesitate to kill me. Because of what I represented, because of the trauma that person was in, because of the reality of that person's life, because of that person's influence. I'm thinking of Gabrielle, the type of person that has a lot of influence and knows nothing but violence. I'm also really impacted by where we are and the images around us, and the very harsh reality that some people's lives are. And I'm imagining that individual, I can imagine that individual reaching a point in that person's life where he can touch his heart and open his heart and change his life away from one of day-to-day violence. However, what that requires, not only of that individual, but of everybody around him, including someone like me who was sitting in front of him, and it's just one person, right? But it's just as an example of what we need to be, what are we actually doing when we involve ourselves in helping people to open their hearts? And are we ready, and how can we help ourselves be ready? It's a lot to do with the inner work, it's a lot to do with the respect, and I'm wondering from H&M point of view, some of those, what you discovered and how you dealt with it and how ready you were to deal with it or not. You know, those difficult moments maybe that you're thinking of, that you were just sharing with us. I think we have to be very conscious of that. It's about the responsibility we have, right, when we engage in this work. Thank you.
Tiona, who's just spoken, and I worked very closely at the very beginning of the Business Plan for Peace for a very rich and rewarding 2 years, wasn't it, Tiona? And then Tiona had to go back to the work she'd been doing previously with the UN peacekeeping forces in the Congo. That's where she's just come from now. That's what she's talking about. She knows what she's talking about here. the questions you raise are huge on the personal level, on the psychological level. The courage that it takes for somebody to be open enough to somebody else to enable them to open their heart is huge. And then, as you rightly say, when that person has opened their heart, it takes enormous support and, I would say, solidity. And here I can't help thinking about Mandela. Those 27 years in Robben Island enabled that man to hone what had been pure bravado and courage and rightness into an incredible ability to see the position of, for example, his jailers. You probably know that when eventually he and his fellow prisoners were given a few square yards of ground to grow vegetables, which they'd been asking for 10 years, and somebody smuggled some seeds in, and they planted these seeds, and up began to grow cucumbers, different types of fruit and vegetables that were like a godsend to these prisoners who'd had nothing but prison gruel for years, and they were just waiting till these things were ripe. Mandela took the first fruits and gave them to the warders. They also, when this came that the prisoners were enabled to do open university degrees and got very highly educated, they started teaching those warders who were illiterate, in spite of the cruelty that they'd been meted out. That took a solidity that you can physically feel from Mandela. You get it viscerally if he's in the room. And so I'm not saying we can all develop that, but it's the type of... this is why this isn't nice, easy, sweet work. It's not. And whether it's in sorting out a family quarrel, or whether it's sorting out something that's going wrong at your child's school, or whether it's a big corporate bust-up, it takes that mixture of humility, humour, and just a switch from what the mantra of the last century was, which Gailey just touched on. The mantra of the last century was, what can I get? The mantra of this century has to be, what can I give? That's the only way humanity's going to survive.
I don't know what I'm going to say. I've been a TV talk show host, I've been a politician, I've been a trainer, I've done all sorts of things all the time. I've done that, I've known what I'm going to say, and don't know what I'm going to say. I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling, I've had all sorts of thoughts going through my head, and I've interrogated them, and I've opened to the terror of taking the microphone, not knowing what to say. The Mighty Heart starts with, what breaks your heart? And there's a question going on over and over inside me, which is, how do we keep people in that place? Because people rush through that place very quickly, and they come to solutions. And I can imagine people taking the Mighty Heart course in whatever it is, 8 weeks, whatever, and they've done it. And then they go out and they tell other people how to do it. And actually, we need to sit with the despair and the not knowing. When I came here with Gertie on the tube was full. People have forgotten already about the COVID stuff, and they're on with their lives. And meanwhile, the earth is burning, and we face existential threat, global catastrophic risk, which is actually a question of time rather than if. It's not if, it's when. How do we open to the full despair of that and stay with it day after day after day?
because that's what it's going to take for the change to happen. And that change, I have no idea what it looks like. I'm studying existential risk with an incredible crackpot team of academics at Cambridge University, and they're using their heads day after day, and God knows what they're doing with their hearts. I don't know, and I'm part of the team, just. And so I come back to that question, and it's not a question to anyone in particular, it's a question to everyone in this room. How do we stay with the terror and the despair and open our eyes to the full darkness that is this world, recognizing that darkness doesn't exist without light, just as light doesn't exist without darkness, and allow things to flow with a certain natural ease and terror and difficulty that is life. I have no idea what I'm going to say.
Thank you. Yes, breathe in, breathe out. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and just yesterday I was on a podcast, and a couple of women who were listening in asked, Tara, how do you see the future as a 12-year-old? And she says, actually, to be really honest, my friends don't really care. So I think what really needs to be done is to teach them how to care first. And that was an opening for me too, as to what goes on in little young minds and what's really needed. We're feeding our children with TikTok and consumption and taking their energy. Are we investing in helping them channel their energy? I don't know. It's a question.
I just felt I wanted just to respond what Paul said, because I think he made a very, very powerful connection with why the mighty heart matters. And you might not know what you were saying, but it was very powerful. Because I think what you're saying is, unless we can stay with the pain and destruction, we won't do anything, or anything serious enough to deal with the problems we face. And the fact that we constantly live in a state of denial and delusion means that we avoid the big problems. And that's why we need to stay in the despair. So I felt your connections were very, very powerful. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Pat Kane. Thank you for a very stimulating presentation. Very briefly, I'm a sort of lay reader in the neuroscience of emotions. Very interesting work by people like Jack Panksepp and Lisa Feldman Barrett. And one of the debates that's going on is the degree to which we are guided by visceral evolved emotions, so fear, anger, panic. And it's the viscerality of these emotions that is important, because people can trigger them if they're visceral. You literally can do nothing about them, they're involuntary reactions. But one of the things that the neuroscientists say is that there's another part of this repertoire, which lust is one of them, which put that to the side for the moment, but care, play and curiosity are also adaptive, visceral, emotional responses. So when I'm looking at the Mighty Heart, sounds like a band, by the way, a good band. I'd probably go and see the Mighty Heart. And I'm being half trivial. The other half of it is, it's not bad to have a certain confidence about what evolution has given to us in terms of positive, attractive, emotional repertoires. The Cambridge Analyticas of this world think they can wire their way through cognitive science and press the buttons of fear, anger, and panic. I'm just saying, from my own reading, Mighty Heart is quite a good way to describe the other part of our evolved emotions, which is care, play, curiosity. As I say, I don't know what to do about lust, but there it is in neuroscience. I do know what to do about lust, but I don't know what to do about it in this discussion. But I suppose that's what I'm saying. The Mighty Heart feels as if it resonates not just with good ethical action, but actually quite a lot of neuroscientific research on the evolutionary side of things. So it's just a report. I don't know if you have a response. I'd love to hear what you think.
It was a quick acknowledgement of what Paul has just shared. I had one quick little story, but also I was really interested to have Gertie be able to share what is happening in the military, if you don't mind, because I sense that the timing of the Mighty Heart right now with what's going on in the world is just critical. And for all of us to be able to pay attention to how it's showing up in our lives. I just wanted quickly in the story to acknowledge what Gailey had shared about service and respect, and to add the word within the heart of compassion, which is what I picked up from what you were sharing. I happen to be living in a community at the moment where an Air Commodore previous is running the chairman of the board, and he had felt completely humiliated by some actions taken of the community. And I observed the revenge that he was seeking to undertake. And I've come into the community and sought to apply my Mighty Heart principles to give respect. But the second piece, as he's a very reactive human being, and I thought, whoa, how did he reach this level and be so reactive? And then I thought, inside that man is a wounded little boy. And in our last conversation, I just went in with some listening and one question, and before I knew it, I had his whole life story laid out before me of what had happened to him as a little boy. I hadn't even asked the question. He just had a need to be seen. And from that, though, I'm finding I'm needing to educate the rest of my community because they've accused me of being nice. Oh, you're so much nicer than I am. I exploded. I said, I do not like the word nice, and this is what it means to me. And so I realized that I have an education of a community, and might we all, from this gathering, take the Mighty Heart lessons. So I've undertaken this from the course, but take this and apply it to our community, because in our fear-driven world, that's the risk, is that we forget the compassion and we forget the defenses that people will take on to protect themselves, amongst which is hierarchy, talking at, etc. But might I just pass with that preamble to Gertie to just ask her to speak to how this is being applied, how you see it for the military, because I think that's so important.
Yes. Well, I'm working with Paul to figure that out. It's a challenge. But I noticed that, for instance, in the Dutch military, things are changing. As you all know, military are instruments of power. They have the authority to use violence if needed, but they are humans. They are humans in uniform. And the fact that now there is an opening in the Dutch military to talk also about, let's say, the humankind and the humanness of the military and about emotions, that is really very, very powerful and very important. Because, as you all know, a lot of military face PTSD, and that has to do with the fact that it's not done to talk about emotions. So there is an initiative in the Dutch military. It's called the Peace Leader Circle. And that's very close to, I think, what the Mighty Heart is envisioning. So it's military themselves, people in uniform and also civilians who try to initiate the conversation about it. And I am trying to connect with them and see how we can, through them and with them, introduce the Mighty Heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Gertie. Thank you. Before we close this evening, I have 3 little calls to action. I'm going to then pass on to Isla to introduce the team, and then you have time to mingle, drink, sign, get the book signed, and say hello to Scilla personally, and any of us. First call to action. We have the course, the Mighty Heart in Action, the open course on 26th of April. If you know anyone or if you're personally interested, the team is here. Second, if you know of organizations that would value from a training like this, and if you have ideas, not just of organizations, but other groups that this training can go to, if you can also please share them with the team, they would really value that. And the third is the organization itself is a non-profit. So if you'd like to fund the organization with the core costs, you can also join the Founders Circle, and you can learn more about that also from Isla on how you can join the core team that supports this work to go further and further.
And to finish, really the most important thank you is to Scilla for bringing us all together tonight. And you asked the question, how do we really create what we're doing? And it's by having a light like Scilla, who helps to find all these incredible people that come together in this room. And so please do connect, share together with Gailey, and we'll continue this journey together. Thank you.